No audio. All right. How about now? Audio. Awesome. All right. Welcome, everyone, to Casual Stroll Through Middle Earth. My name's Matt Elliott. I go by Scenario on the message boards. I'm a senior world designer on Lord of the Rings Online. And this week, we're going to be doing a very special presentation of Cardolan, which is one of the new regions that we're launching with Before the Shadow. Typically, we do these streams about once a month, but with as much landscape as we had to cover with Before the Shadow, we felt like doing, two episodes, one right after the other, one week next week. So this episode, this stream, we're giving you a tour of the realms of a little bit of Rudar, a little bit of Cardolan, a little bit of Arthedain, kind of the South Downs, all of these areas that I think people have for a very long time, kind of wistfully looked at to the south from Breland and have always wondered when they're going to get there. And now we're finally introducing it. Before I get started with the stream, I just want to give you all kind of a little bit of background about what this stream is for those of you that are just joining that have never really seen the stream before. This is a world design focused stream. So I'm going to be talking a lot about what goes into building the landscape, building the world of Middle Earth, the kind of research and work that we put into it. I'm not going to be talking about things like lag, things like monster play, things like balance or class information, those sort of things, because that's not my field of expertise. You don't want me talking about those things because I'm just going to give you the wrong answers or bad answers, and that doesn't make anyone happy. So if you do have questions, I'm definitely happy to answer them in regards to world design and level design and just Middle Earth stuff in general. Feel free to drop them in chat, and I'll do my best to answer them as I can. Um, but yeah, so let's get this show started. Welcome. So right now I'm kind of parked still in Swanfleet. We have not yet entered into Tharbad. Last week's stream we kind of ended in this general area here, and now we're getting ready to take our first steps into Tharbad, the ruined kind of river port city. Um, for those of you who watched last week's stream, you may see some familiar silhouettes in the distance from areas that we looked at but didn't quite get into because we weren't ready to go there yet. Mossward, and I'll bring up the map real quick so you can see where we are. Mossward is down here. Tharbad is over here, and we're going to be heading that way very, very soon. All right. Well, let's get things going then. So much like Swanfleet, Cardolan was built in a very similar way using our kind of new tools and techniques that I've been working on over the last couple of years as we've had opportunities to kind of play around with doing some new design style work. A lot of the landscape has its initial pass done using tools such as tools called World Machine to kind of generate height maps that I can then sample and then turn into the landscape that you see that we're running around on here. And one of the things that that does really well for us is it allows us to kind of build out a large landscape and then really not have to worry too much about fine tuning of the terrain itself, but instead focus on the fine tuning of the terrain textures, the scene files, those kinds of things, and how they're placed, which really speeds things up for us. Normally, before this process, when we would build a new region, we would spend easily 3 weeks, if not more, depending on the size of the region, going through and kind of doing a first pass sculpt on the landscape. And this new method and process like kind of allows us to we can go in and do a very high level sculpt pass if we want to. So we could go through and we could, if we know where we want certain mountains to be, if we want a mountain range to be there somewhere, we can do very basic, bare bones, low detail terrain sculpting, basically just spiking up the terrain. And then we can bring it into these other tools and kind of refine what it looks like and what it feels like. Um, so yeah, one of the things that I'm really excited about with this particular space too is just like again things that it teases in the future. We have the Gray Flood heading south, and it's really like another part of our like teasing a broader, bigger world. Where the impassable's are not just the end of what's built. We try to do a rough sculpt out of the landscape in the distance so that it feels more like this is seated in a world as opposed to a fishbowl or a theme park. So once I get through Tharbad, I'll take a second to take a look at some of the questions that are in here. And apologies if I run through Tharbad and there are questions about Tharbad. But as you can see here, we've kind of Tharbad is in ruins. The past history of Tharbad is one that's kind of rough. It's had and seen a lot of tragedies and disasters, between flooding and plagues and whatnot. Like Tharbad just has not had a good go. And very often, if the people of like Breland, for example, were actual live people that you could talk to, and you were to ask them about Tharbad, they'd probably give you like ghost stories about it. The scary ruined ghost city of the south that no one ever really goes to, and honestly, like, because it's in ruins, it somewhat hinders Breland's connection with the rest of the southern world. It hinders its connections with Rohan, hinders its connections with things like Gondor and whatnot too. It's still possible to kind of circumnavigate around Tharbad and find other ways to get to the south. But this was a major thoroughfare. Like, I'm standing on the Greenway right here, which you may be familiar with from Breland, the road that runs from Fornost up in the North Downs all the way down to Gondor if you were to follow it from one end to the other. But Tharbad being in ruins is a major, blocking point for that, and it prevents a connection to the greater world. So here we are in our first quest hub of Tharbad as well, the Stone Crop, or of Cardolan, the Stone Crop encampment. So while I pause here to let you all take in the quest hub, I will take a look at some of the questions that we have going on here as well. Brazilian says, I want to know, what do you play solo and what class do you prefer? So when I started the game, when I started playing the game for myself, I've been working on the game since it was in development years and years and years ago. I always had a soft spot for burglars. And then I took a break, and several years worth of break from playing the game, and came back. And most recently, I've been playing a lot of my Bjorning, and I played a Guardian for a while. And I think with Before the Shadow coming out, one of the things that I'm really excited to do is I've been wanting to play a Brawler for a while. And this is a great opportunity for me to jump in and play a Brawler. Gentle Ass says, there's been some debate if there will be a level increase for everyone with this release. Among those I run with, any way I can get it from answering this, there is no level cap increase coming with Before the Shadow. Before the Shadow is kind of intended to be a fresh start for players new and old alike. It's an opportunity for players to jump in all at the same space, all at the same time, and participate in a unified beginner experience without having to worry about navigating around the world to meet up with your friends. M. Murphy J11 asks, does the world team use procedural techniques for placing assets? How much of a new zone is still handcrafted versus generated? So we try to leverage tools that exist and that are out there as much as we can to help kind of move along our world development processes. So for landscape, that often means that we use a tool called World Machine to kind of generate landscape forms that we can then kind of sample and use on the landscape to build a terrain. When it comes to things like scene files and whatnot, we handcraft systems by which things like frills, rocks, trees, bushes, we craft those systems, and then those systems will go through and place a lot of those things on the landscape. And then when it comes to things like terrain textures, those are hand painted ourselves. We do have some systems that will help us paint things like cliffs, a little bit more easily. But in general, terrain painting is the most by hand. We still do also have to paint down the kinds of scene files we want to have used in the space. So usually we'll start out with an inner region. We'll start out and just have a broad brush, like everything uses frills. So everything is grass, maybe some flowers and whatnot. That's its base. And we'll paint that down. And then we'll go through and we'll hand paint, okay, I want there to be random trees here. I want there to be random rocks there. And we have these scene file systems that have different settings and properties to them that know what assets to pull in to place around. Um, Looking at this, it reminds me I do need to go through and replace the grass frills that are being used here, because these are a different frill than we want. These are actually a little bit lighter than we want. So I think I need to go through. Maybe I'll do that after the stream. I'll go through and make sure that those frills get replaced. Um, let's see. Lomfine says, "Are there new Arnor assets in Tharbad?" So one of the things that we've introduced is kind of a revamp of the Arnorian assets, as well as an expansion of the asset set. So that they're a little bit more efficient, because a lot of the old Arnorian ruin asset sets were pretty heavy in terms of their like texture costs. It wouldn't be shocking to see a tower have 6 or 7 textures associated with it. And that often made it really hard for us too to make variations on them if we wanted to do color variations. So, for example, the old set we had the kind of like the yellow rock Arnorian ruins, and then there's like a gray rock version. There's a red rock version. There is a kind of mossy, dingy, like lichen covered version. And all of those actually take a considerable amount of time for our artists to make variations on, mostly because there are so many textures and they're spread out so many different places. So one of our goals with this update was to kind of step back, see what our artists could do, to kind of revisit these assets and reintroduce them as um, updated assets that can be pretty easily modified if we need to. One of the other things that was done too was we brought in some more of the like Gondorian style architecture and gave it an Ornorian feel, because these assets, these cultures, are all somewhat related to some degree. They're not at this point in the narrative like super closely related, but at one point they all sort of were. Let's go down through some of the questions. Let's see. Going down through, seeing what I can answer. Again, I'm not answering questions about lag, classes, PvMP, any of that stuff. So hopefully you're focusing on level and world design questions. So Aegis Leverage asks, I was wondering not generally about the landscaping, but about the names of the towns created among the new regions. I know, for example, Tharbad is mentioned and shown on the map. How do you generate names for towns that are smaller or never been mentioned on any kind of map? Same question applies to Karis Gelibrin in Swanfleet. Is that not supposed to be called Austin Edel, or are there other names, or some names restricted from using them? So we only have the rights to things that are explicitly in The Hobbit, the Lord of the Rings trilogy, and any of the appendices in those books. So if there is a name that appears in any of those, we can use it. However, in things like the Silmarillion and other source materials, if something in there is not mentioned in the stuff that we have access to, we can't actually reference that by name. So Austin Edel, I don't believe, is something that's mentioned in the stuff that we have rights to, which means that we need to come up with analog names, and we do this very often, quite frequently. I think one of the biggest ones was um, with Mordor Besieged and introducing um, Isildur and his brothers. there were character names that we didn't have access to, so we had to come up with kind of a story and a conceit on how we can include these characters, but not say the names that we can't say. Um, Druid's Fire asks, do you and before I move on to Druid's Fire question, so then for other town names, such as Moss Ward, there's a town here in Cardolan called Hearn. Those names are usually a product of research by our lore person. He kind of goes through and he looks at and sees, oh, we have this request for this location. Okay, so this location is a town. It's a farming town. Um, what would make sense for a Brelandish farming town name to be, and he'll go through the research process, to to find and understand those things. So Druid's Fire asks, do you take notes for yourself if you encounter something that needs to be fixed when you're playing the game in your off time? Yes, I do. I have a very large and long-running Outlook draft, basically, that is all of the, like, I need to fix this, I need to fix that, and it kind of becomes my, like, rainy day, bug pull. If I don't have anything specifically in my queue, I'll come and look at that and be like, oh, I should fix that. Or it's something where I can raise the issue to an artist or an engineer or a designer when I come across it. So let's see other questions. MM Murphy J11 asks, new waterfall shaders, when? I don't have any sort of ETA or discussion on that. It's certainly not something that's specifically on our plate at the moment, but it's something that I think we're always looking to find ways to improve. Let's see. So Gentle Ass says, any way to get the license to use the other source materials from those who took over after Chris Tolkien passed away? That is a business level conversation that I don't really have any real input or say in. So I can't really speak to how viable getting access to the rights to other source material would be. That's, like I said, that's more of a business level thing. Night Tellurian says, if I don't buy Before the Shadow now, will I be able to buy it in the future? Yeah, like all of our expansion packs, major or mini, they will eventually become available through the store for purchase, and they're gonna stay available for purchase. So if you aren't able to get them now, don't worry about it. You will still be able to get them in the future. Softsnake GR says, why have you chosen the reddish terrain color that you have already used in the Trollshaws or Iron Hills and not chose something closer to Breland terrain colors? So, Cardolan, in particular, is known for its red rocks and red hills. So while in Swanfleet I used red rocks, in the southern portions anyways, because those were adjacent to Enedwaith, in Cardolan, very specifically through what is available through source material and whatnot, it's very clear that red rocks are a thing that is present in here. So that's why we went with red here. We have a couple of different styles of red rocks. Some of this more kind of ruddy, pinkish, reddish rock here. Further to the west and south, the red gets a little bit more saturated. So Hoppa Joel says, just guessing, but the waterfall lost in the Manfolk homesteads, is that a result of terrain changes needed for continuity? Yes, that is. So one of the things that I did when I first kind of came back to working on LOTRO after my hiatus was I kind of revamped Breland a bit to to kind of be a little bit more modern, but also like there are some things that always just bug me a little bit in terms of water flow. Um, and so when I was working in Breland, I wanted to like connect Archit with the rest of the world because it always feels weird when you just have like a um, a river that goes nowhere kind of thing. I don't want to fix this. I have to make a note for myself on this too. Um, so with Cardolan, I wanted to try to make it feel as contiguous and connected as possible. And one of the things that like really struck me was how human housing, Breland Homesteads, has this like river system that just kind of pools up, and eventually that would, in reality, flood that little basin. So part of what I wanted to do with the Cardolan changes was to find a way to connect Breland homesteads into the rest of the world, and that meant kind of changing the flow of water, if that makes sense. Having the waterfall turn into a stream that heads south, instead of a weird pooling situation. Uh, this was a fun space to build, kind of a faux interior dungeon space. We don't do a lot of these. Sometimes it's a little tricky too to do the day file changes, going from like normal outside ambience to a like dark and gloomy space. It can be tricky to make that happen. Um, So Snake GR says Cardolan map goes all the way west to Brandywine River and or stops and Old Forest border. So we'll take a quick look at it. So the map for Cardolan goes all the way west. There is a portion of the Old Forest that is a part of Cardolan, and then you can also swim the Brandywine River south from Buckland into here. The western banks are still inaccessible. You won't be able to go onto them. Reeds are blocking your way, but you can traverse basically from Anuminos all the way down to Sarn Ford at this point. Let's see. So I'm running a little bit to the east just so I can show you how things connect here. So we're coming up on Harlweg, the swampy, marshy areas in the southern parts of the Lonelands. I wanted to show you how like things are connected and contiguous here. Like you can run now right up these hills, right up these hills to get into Cardolan from the Lonelands, and that holds for the entirety of that northern border. I do need, that's another note for myself. I need to go amp up the visibility range of Weathertop because that needs to be uh, fixed up. Uh, let's take a look now. Will Swanfleet and Carlon Day files be available for housing like the other regions? Yes, they will. Housing actually has a ton of new stuff coming in for it. There are a couple of changes that I had hoped to be able to make for housing in terms of hooks, but that didn't pan out, so I had to go back to the drawing board for it. But housing is going to see decorative floors, decorative stairs in a huge assortment. There are going to be Arnorian flavored housing decorations for your yards, and some interior stuff as well. There's going to be decorative um, wall and floor assets based off of that. There's going to be some new wall and floor surfaces, and there are going to be new day file objects for all of the different day files that come with Swanfleet and Cardolan. So you can get those really, really awesome sunsets. I might even think about making just ones that are like the sunset versions. In addition to that, we'll have music boxes. I'm not sure how those rewards are going to be doled out yet. I don't know quite what NPCs are getting them and when. There may be some things we hold back on, so there may not be the like massive full suite of everything with the launch of it. But there's a lot of housing decorations coming, and that should give everyone a lot more fun things to do. Like I'm really excited about the decorative floors and stairs because I think those will um, give a lot of opportunities for decoration for people. So we're going to start heading to the west now. We stopped at the farm, so we're going to head towards these ruins here. These are kind of like the anchor ruins of all of Cardolan. These are very central. This is Karanost. This is our big ruin hub monster camp space for the region. And in most areas, don't mind my work system; it's making some noise. Um, in most areas of Cardolan, you will be able to see these ruins to some extent. They may be a little like faded out because of fog, but that's kind of your like waypoint through Cardolan. If you're ever trying to figure out where you are, look around and see if you can find the ruins of Karanost on your horizon and start heading there, and you'll be able to know where to go. And that's something that I think in general is fairly important um, to like the navigation experience of any landscape that you build. Like you want to have these kind of wayfinding opportunities where the layout of the space kind of draws your eye in a certain way and helps you figure out where you need to go and how to get there. But yeah, so there's Karanos. So this is a fairly large ruin that's split up over kind of over a river, and there are the eastern side is more like friendly quest hub side, and then the western side is more of the monster camp side of things. And I know Orion actually had wanted to like experiment and play with the mission system, so he actually has several missions that are happening in this space, and these missions kind of advance a narrative um, as you're moving through, pushing and pulling against enemy forces as they try to take the entirety of Karanost. Aegis Leverage asks, are you also involved in creating the landscaping for raids like the Hidden Horde, Remerchant, etc.? How is creating of this landscape forming itself? Because I can assume this is also very connected with different kinds of mechanics, and you want to implement particular piece on that particular piece of landscape. So instances generally are a lot more heavily designed spaces when it comes to landscape or the actual physical space. When we're building landscape, um, we often it's usually a world first thing where we have the maps, we build out what we kind of want to see in the landscape, and then kind of the content fits into it. With instance spaces, those are usually more encounter focused. So often, what will happen in most situations is the designer who is making the mechanics for the instance will have a map in mind. They'll have an idea for their gameplay that they want in the space, and that map will be very rough. It'll just basically be the shapes of the space that they want. But that gives us the information for the flow that we need to build towards. And then we'll build towards kind of that direction. Um, Now, sometimes instance spaces, like a designer will be like, I don't really care about the look and feel and theming of the space as long as, the arena for the fight is this kind of shape. And usually, and those are opportunities for us to go like a little wild um, and build out how we want to build out or how we would like to build out. But I think very often you know instances and things like raids are a lot more encounter driven in terms of their layout and design than real world driven. Let's see. Is there any chance to have already thought this region would be one of the? So Sawsnake GR, I'm trying to make sense of your question, but I'm thinking it sounds like you're wondering if this was an area that we were ever thinking we would build back in 2007. And I think we didn't think we would be building as much as we have built for Lord of the Rings in 2007. I think, we were thinking we would be lucky if we got to Mordor, or we'd be lucky if we even got to Moria. Um, and I think we've done that. And now where we're at is in this kind of nice sweet spot of us being able to like play around a little bit and go to places that may not be entirely expected, or places that may not have been thought to be really important places, and that's an opportunity for us then to tell like really strong, meaningful stories in them. Taurian 1003 says, "Have a drink. Thank you for the reminder. I've been talking a lot." So we'll pause here to look at this stunning view. Let's get a good sunset. Let's go here. Now, there we go. We'll let the sunset go through here for a little bit while I look through these questions. Um, so, Fervoril says, "Is there a deeper reason for Enedwaith and therefore the southern edges of Swanfleet being so much higher terrain-wise than the northern Eriador regions?" Um, there isn't a specific reason for it. I think again, it's a case of us building in a certain way and not really assuming we would ever, you know, build into other portions of the land. I think Enedwaith and Dunland are kind of very foothillsy, and if we ever build further west of them, we'll certainly need to kind of slope down in order to meet the rivers. Thankfully, we've got these new awesome cliff assets that will help us kind of ease that transition a little bit. And I think the cliffs of near Klager are really fantastic looking. All right, let's see. Can you zoom out more? Thanks. Go through a couple more questions here. So, any word on when we will be able to get a sneak peek and play it ourselves on Bullroar? We are hoping to have. Well, I'm going to just jump off a cliff because that's what I do. I love jumping off cliffs or falling off them. Gundabad was not good on my repair bills. Um, so when will this be on Bullroar for preview? I think we're hoping to get it onto Bullroar fairly soon. I don't have any specific dates that I can speak to, but you can be pretty rest assured that when we do have a date available to announce, it will be on everywhere: message boards, social media, maybe even the launcher. We definitely want everyone to have an opportunity to get in and to give us more bugs, because that's what we thrive on. um, Papa Joel says, "I love the fill in the gaps work that you've been doing. I've always loved just exploring, and the invisible walls make me want to go beyond in that direction." So I think Swanfleet and Cardolan are both very specific and intentional reactions to wanting to make a bigger open world that does not feel hemmed in. I think invisible walls are still going to be the reality of the game for places that are not built yet, and I know that makes some people sad, but that's the reality. And I think we're better now at managing those barriers than we used to be. Um, but I think that you know we I think we have a good opportunity to keep building sort of in this way, making connections where we can make them, and trying to find ways to make the borders between these fill in the gap spaces work towards growing the world. and filling out the world and making it a bigger, more believable space. Um, Druid's Fire says, "Repair bills. Are you not friends with Wenda Cranesbill?" I usually am, but sometimes I just completely forget to go talk to her because if I am like in an intense, focused like deeding period, or if I am doing a lot of missions or instance runs, I just forget, and then I see I have like a 7 or 8 gold repair bill. So it happens. Um, so we are currently. This is the town of Hearn. So this is a original creation by us. Cardolan is in general kind of considered this forsaken land. There might be some people farming it, but there's not a lot going on here. But we felt we really needed to have a major social center in here just so that new players get an opportunity to explore and experience a social center like this without first having to go to Bree. Because Bree can be a little overwhelming. So this is a little bit, Hearn is a bit more of a simpler, easier to navigate major social center town. You'll be able to find all of your expected town services and whatnot here, just like you could in Langarav in Argon in Swanfleet. Let's see. Given the size and scope of the new landscapes, did you encounter any specific challenges? So I think one of the big challenges that we ran into is like this landscape is definitely ambitious, and we always sort of have expectations for how filled we want a landscape to be with like content and whatnot. And we sort of had to uh, work on ourselves in such a way that we uh, lowered our expectations for content density and really wanting to make this space a little bit more of an explorer's space. The content is very focused around the hubs and whatnot, but there's still a ton of open explorable landscape, and I think it's kind of a challenge for us to not to resist the urge to just fill every square inch with everything, because that's just not feasible with the size of this landscape. And I think there's some certain value in having landscapes that are just more openly explorable from time to time. This might be a techie question. But do you have any thoughts on the upcoming RTX Remix and NVIDIA Omniverse platform? Could this potentially be useful for LOTRO at some point? I have to admit, I am very not knowledgeable about that. I've seen a couple of articles on it, but I have not done a deep dive, so I'm not particularly familiar with specifics. Cardolan reminds me of Rohan, feels open and wide. Yes, that was what I was wanting to achieve. I think I still personally I love Swanfleet. That's my baby, more so than Cardolan. But I think there are some things that we've done in Cardolan that I think are just gorgeous. Like particularly like if you look at the map here and how much this looks like an overhead Google Maps shot of a map. Like I think we did a really great job of representing a landscape here in a way that like feels real and feels natural, within the boundaries of our own engine and our tools and our style. I think we did a really great job of it. Tooting my own horn and all of that. So Murphy J11 says, and maybe I'll just call you Murphy from here on out. So, what are some design principles you stick to, and how have they changed over the course of the game? So I think one of our biggest design principles that has changed and morphed over time has been how we approach building things like monster camps. Um, back in the day, we had a very like strong set of like rules and guidelines for ourselves on how monster camps were to be built, how many entrance points, exit points, how long they should take, how many pulls, those sorts of things. And I think we've kind of pulled back a bit on those sorts of things. I think in part because some of those camps can be really like cumbersome and tiring to play through. And they were kind of complex for complexity's sake, I guess. Um, and I think we tried to kind of back away from that. Um, you know, Instead of having things like the Orc Valley in the North Downs, which is a massive, potentially multi-hour slog through just to get to a boss, and then you have to go back. And I think we're trying we try to maintain some of our like our entrance and egress concepts, um, but have kind of pulled back a bit on complexity for the sake of complexity. As far as building landscapes and whatnot goes, we do have metrics that we want to hit for number of mixed spawns on a landscape, number of critters, number of resource nodes, those sorts of things, and those have like morphed a little bit here and there, but in general, those have stayed pretty consistent over the years as far as density goes. We still play with it once in a while. I think we got good feedback from, I think it was Vales of Anduin, maybe, or Elderslade, or Vales of Anduin, or Grey Mountains, where there was just conversation about the density of spawns and how good it felt. So I think we try to like lean into that a little bit as well. So here we are at the western edge of Cardolan. You can see to the or to the west what would be aspects of the Shire. Now you can get to the Shire from here. We did add in a waypoint, so if you cross at Sarn Ford, you'll see a portal sparkly, and you can hit that, and that will take you to the Shire, kind of south of Mickle Delving, near the Shire homesteads. So here's Sarnford itself. We go across the water. To the north is more of the Old Forest and Tirn Gorthad, which is kind of our Barrow Downs experience. One of the things too that I did, and I'll talk about it when we get up there, is trying to find ideas, concepts, and experiences that players would have. So we'll cross here so you can see right there. As we were building these spaces, we wanted to try to capture some of the quintessential concepts and experiences that players would have had normally if they were playing the original storylines. Some of those ideas, some of those concepts, some of those looks aren't things that you would encounter if you did something different like this. So we tried to have some of those concepts come in. Tirn Gorthad, for example, is kind of our Barrow Down / Fields of Fornos experience that you wouldn't normally get if you were playing like the Shire Breland stuff. You'd eventually get there, but with this experience, you don't. So, so let's see. I'll pause here for the view and answer a couple more questions. Let me scroll up because I think I missed a couple. Design principles. Okay. Any chance of refitting maps such as Moria where the roads and character position don't match? I think those are sorts of things that we want to kind of address as we have opportunities to make updates to those maps. I actually have a couple of bugs for, I think one is in Wells of Langflood, where the road on the map does not match the road in game because we built the paint over for the map before the landscape was done, so they're kind of out of place there. And there are other ones where it's just like a actual land block off, and those are things that we'll want to address as we get bugs for them, or as we have time to address them and update things. Soft Snake GR says, with Before the Shadow, if I'm not mistaken, Breland becomes the first region to have other regions in all four of its corners, west, north, south, and east. Yeah, I think that the only I don't want to say Breland is completely encapsulated. There's like a little portion here that doesn't have playable, like this here, this impassable here doesn't actually have any playable space around it. That has not been built as yet. But in general, yeah, like Breland is bordered and surrounded by almost completely by other playable landscape, which is great. Um, so let's see. Looking forward to rolling out in new zone characters. See this? Am I looking forward? Oh, exclamation points, not question mark. Awesome. Um, have you given any information about the new system yet, the delving system? So the delving system, I believe Orion has talked about it a couple of times, and I think there is an article available for it. I don't want to speak about it myself because I don't want to make any mistakes in talking about what it is. It's a more systems focused thing. I can say that all of the missions that are a part of Before the Shadow will have the delving system in it, and it allows you to tailor. Excuse me. It allows you to tailor those missions' difficulties. So, all right, now we are heading north. North towards, we'll head towards Tirn Gorthad. So again, like I was saying before, Tirn Gorthad is kind of our Barrow Downs meets Fields of Fornost experience, since um, someone playing the Before the Shadow storyline would not have typically experienced either Barrow Downs or Fornost without running a field. If they are following the storyline of Before the Shadows and following kind of the content breadcrumbs, they're not likely to go to either of those areas. And that always just feels like a cool kind of experience that people should have. So we're gonna work our way up there. I'm gonna dev magic myself up a little bit higher. Boom. So we've got Tirn Gorthad, and then we also have a bit of the Old Forest bordering up against that as well. So we get our spooky fogs coming in. One of the things that I'm hoping we can do, and I hope I can get before we launch things, is I'd really like to have we have this great fog effect while you're in the region, but it's a little weird sometimes where you're standing off in a distance and Tir Northad is just like bright and clear and pristine, and it really should have kind of some sort of like ominous fog hanging over it in the distance, and I'm hoping we can get that effect um, in place. But let's see. So Eros216 says, since you've been working on expanding the openness of the game world, do you have any wish list areas that you would like to get to? Um, I think this was we did the Yondershire, which was one of the like big things that I've wanted to do forever, and it's always kind of sat with me as like kind of unfortunate that Ered Lewin was stuck off kind of in its own little bubble and not really connected to the rest of the world. So that was like the major one that I was really wanting to see. Right now, I'm kind of just in the mindset of like I'm really enjoying filling in spaces, and it's not something that we're going to be doing all of the time going forward. But this past year has just been a lot of fun being able to kind of go in and build out. Let me click myself so I'm not getting all those pop-ups. This past year has been really nice, just being able to go in and kind of like fill in and just make the world feel bigger and feel like an actual real connected world. Um, so that's really like my I think what I'm feeling good about now. I'd actually have to like sit down and think about um, what I would want to do next if I, what next region there is that I would want to, tackle, because I don't have like a lot that I am like, this is a place that I like desperately want to build, um, kind of thing. I'll find something at some point. Trust me, there will be something that I like. I'm like, oh, I really want to build that. But so Flexax says, how do you start in a place as opposed in that place as opposed to Breland if you play a man? Do you have to run a long way to a stable master then ride to Swanfleet? So with Before the Shadow, when you create a new character and you've purchased Before the Shadow, you'll have the option to select which starter experience you want. You can select your original starter experience. So if you are a Hobbit, you can choose to do the Shire. If you're a Stout Axe, you can choose to do your Mordor Stout Axe intro. Um, so you have that option. But if you select Before the Shadow, your starter instance is in Mossward. Compared to other starter experiences, it's a much more streamlined experience that gets you into the actual world faster. And this is being done specifically and particularly so that people that want to like meet up with friends can do so pretty quickly and efficiently. Um, so now we're going to get down into the Old Forest. Old New Forest. One of the other things that I did do as part of the changes with the Old Forest is if you are in the original Old Forest, there are some new additional tweaks and adjustments in there. Um, so yeah, definitely check out the Old Forest in addition to the new Old Forest um, when you go exploring. Let's see. Seeing the road here, is there a possibility to change the Old South Road in Dunland, Rohan, Gondor to also feature the tiles in Swanfleet? Um, the tiles, I think, are not likely to change, and we're probably not going to add them up through here because the Greenway, which is the section that runs from Fornost all the way down to Tharbad, is one very specific road. And then when it gets to Tharbad, it actually changes into the Old South Road, which is more of the like Gondorian, more of a Gondorian highway than anything. So I think flavor wise, it probably makes sense to kind of leave them as two distinct looking roads. Uh, So as I'm running around in here, the old forest, even during the daytime, still feels a little bit too bright. So this might be something where I come in and like adjust the brightness levels down a little bit because you're in a forest canopy here, so it should be a little bit darker. Maybe darkening the fog might help some of that too. Um, so Feveril says, is there any way to have reflections of trees in the water from greater distances? They sometimes seem to be missing, or is that me? I think things like those reflections, um, I, I don't believe distant imposters reflect. So if you're not seeing trees in the water, it might be because of the distant imposters not reflecting. Um, and I believe that's mostly done for the sake of efficiency, so that when your computer is processing things, they're not overwhelmed by having to do all of that extra work as well. I could be wrong, but that's just the idea that I have in my head. Druid's Fire says it looks like we'll get to knock down those guys in Andrath and keep going. So yeah, the road, and I'm gonna work my way over there as well. Um, Seeing rocks that I need to replace with new versions of rocks. Um, so yeah, the old gate in Andrath in Breland is also now open for players to traverse through. So we'll get over there. We can take a quick look at it. I don't have much time left on this stream, so that'll probably be a good place for us to wind up. Maybe I'll even end the stream at where the water is coming through in the Breland homesteads. But yes, so this was previously gated off, is now open, so you can go through the Southgard ruins. And the previously inaccessible, except via jumping puzzle, campsite up here is also now accessible as well. But the jumping puzzle still remains, so if you wanted to do that, you could do that. So let's see. Any plans on incorporating previous missions into the delving system at a later date? I believe that is the plan, but Orion would have a better tact on that. Right, let's run up here. I'm going to go down through these questions while I can. So let's actually start heading over this way, because you know about that hidden brigand camp. Everyone knows about that. So Hapa Joel says, I appreciate the lighting here. I'm assuming he means about the old forest. Areas that go too dark really cause eye strain for some folks, progressing into migraines. And they certainly can. I think in the space that I was in, I want to push it maybe a little bit darker, but not like pitch black. I think places like Mirkwood and Fangorn, we probably went a little too dark on. It makes it a little hard to see. So the changes happening around Breland Homestead is, with these impassables cut down, there are still barriers keeping you from going into the homestead itself. We haven't done the R&D we need to see if having a homestead accessible on I0 does anything good or bad. So as a safety measure, we've got bushes and whatnot keeping you from getting into it. Let's see if we'll scroll down here. So here's where the waterfall used to be. And now you can see it is now kind of free-flowing water with some reeds blocking you from getting into the homestead. But it's now open and you can see out through. I mean, overall, the impassables are much lower, so you don't get the kind of hemmed-in box canyon feel that you used to at one point. The Midgewater Marsh also connects to all of this. So let me just get to a good kind of vantage point. I'll take a pause, read the last couple questions, and then call it a day, I think. All right, let's see. Would wandering low-level 20 to 40 bosses be a good thing for LOTRO, like wandering troll that goes through the lone lands, through troll shaws and such, or wandering orc packs? So we have the region threats, which are usually placed kind of out of the way. They're often much higher level than the zone that they're in. So we've experimented with that a little bit. I think for like brand new low level character stuff, going too hard into that is a bit risky and can result in a frustrating experience for players. Mognug says, Yondershire was such a massive improvement for the Shire. Are there any plans to revisit the Shire and update it a bit at some point? So I know one of our world designers, really wants to take on a pet project of his in going through and updating the various taverns in the Shire to match what he built for the Yondershire, because those Yondershire taverns are gorgeous. Immaculado 21 says Casual Stroll equals run like a madman. Well, I have an hour to get through some rather large terrain, so that is why I'm booking it. I could be running at run 3 or 4, so I'm only running at speed 2. So, I'm having a hard time pronouncing that. Why not put a housing broker within an entrance to the homesteads. The challenge with that is entering an instance while within an instance. All neighborhoods are instances, so having a broker in there would probably not work. Um, you just like you can't join an instance. Um, it's really hard to teleport in that way as well. So um, it's another thing we need to research on. Galdwin. So I'm gonna answer a couple more questions and then call it. Um, Galdwin says, would it be possible to open up Breetown more in the future so that it's more traversable? There's quite a few empty spaces in town that could be filled and detailed. So Breetown exists in the way it does for performance reasons, at least performance reasons as of 15 years ago. Those things may not be a concern anymore, and it may be something where we could go back and revisit and really flesh out Breetown if there was a good reason for us to do it, or if it was a side project, a pet project that someone wanted to take on for themselves. Will there ever be a technical limit on how far the landscape can be expanded before needing a portal, for example? Surprised at how far Eriador has grown. There are technical limits. We do have a limited size that we can build within before we need to introduce a new region or a new set of height maps and land blocks. And we've done that several times. We have Eriador as one region, Ravania as another region, Gondor is another one, and Mordor is another one. And then there's Tales of Yore, which is a fifth one. So there's all of these different regions that are in play, and those are all because we just hit physical size limits. Uh, Zoravan says, is that hitching that happens when I'm running? Is that being looked at? That's purely because I'm running on an admin client. Admin clients are a little bit more hitchy than normal retail clients are. So I'm going to do 3 more questions, and I'm just going right down the list, and then I'm going to call it a night. Uh, rather than large homesteads, would it be feasible to have an apartment type housing in a place like Bree? It's something that we definitely thought about, and something that's not out of the realm of question. In fact, there is a space in Breetown that I built when I did the revamp of it to specifically accommodate for that if it's something that we ever wanted to do. However, our next housing offering is not going to be a Manish housing area at all, because we've got enough of those. We want to offer more options. Does class you use matter? Like this time you're using Burger class and Swanfleet use the Warden class. I'm not sure how to answer that question. Um, where were we ever going to get Central Gondor with a regular sky space? Never say never. That may be something in the future that we can get to. I know going through Gondor in the Dawnless Day period is a little depressing just because of how bleak it is, and it would be nice sometime to maybe see Gondor in a different light. And who knows, maybe sometime in the future we will. But anyways, so thank you everyone for joining me on this hurried yet still casual stroll of Middle Earth as we took a look through Cardolan. Hopefully soon we will be able to see you all in here as part of a Bull Roar. Look for an announcement on that, and you can get your preview experience going with it. In the meantime, enjoy playing on the live games as best you can. If you have friends that have been thinking about joining the game, now's a great time too, because we do have the free code out there for people to load up on quest packs that they may not already have. So yeah, thank you everyone for joining and for hanging out here. Next stroll, we'll be back to our regularly scheduled strolls through Rovanian, I think, going through the regions that we haven't been through yet. We wanted to take this quick interlude to show you what was coming with Before the Shadow. So thank you, everyone. I hope you have a great weekend, and we'll see you all next time.